A$AP Rocky's legal situation, some canceled tour dates from Drake, and maybe even a potential new couple alert. All juicy details you won't find just skimming those headlines.
It really is fascinating how those worlds kind of collide, isn't it?
Exactly.
From courtrooms to concerts, always more than meets the eye, right?
Right. So let's start with A$AP Rocky. Remember that assault case a while back?
Yeah.
Well, he was acquitted, meaning not guilty, but now the same person, ASA Relli, is hitting him with a civil lawsuit.
Interesting.
Yeah, so how does that work? I thought if he was acquitted, that was the end of it.
Well, that's where the differences between criminal and civil cases comes in. In a criminal case, it's the state versus the defendant. And that burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very high bar to clear.
Okay, yeah, I get that. So even though Rocky was cleared criminally, Relli can still sue him in civil court.
Absolutely. In a civil case, it's one individual against another. And the burden of proof is lower. It's more likely than not.
Interesting.
So think of it like this.
Okay.
You're trying to prove your friend stole your cookie.
Okay.
In a criminal case, you need like a confession or video evidence, right?
Right.
But in a civil case, maybe some crumbs on their shirt are enough to convince a judge or jury.
I see. Crumbs on the shirt won't put you in jail, but they might cost you some money.
Exactly. So Relli's lawyers are saying they'll fully litigate this case, and they believe they have a strong argument. But Rocky's side seems pretty unconcerned.
So could this actually end up hurting Rocky's career, even if he wins?
I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
Think about brand deals and his public image.
Right.
Even if he's found not liable, this whole saga could create, some negative associations.
Yeah, definitely.
It'll be interesting to see how his team navigates this whole thing.
It's like that old saying, no such thing as bad publicity. Doesn't always hold true.
Especially these days. Okay, well, enough legal talk for now. Let's move on to Drake. So he canceled some tour dates, right?
Yeah.
And the initial explanation was scheduling issues.
Yeah, scheduling issues.
But sitting still for like 12 days doesn't really seem like a very Drake reason,
Oh, really?
So, of course, the rumor mill went into overdrive,
Yeah.
blaming poor ticket sales.
Right.
But here's the kicker. Our sources say those shows were actually sold out.
Wow.
And get this, he also sold out a festival with like 135,000 tickets.
Really? So it wasn't about the money then? Huh. What gives?
Right. That's the million-dollar question. There's got to be something else going on behind the scenes. Could it be something personal? Maybe some creative differences with his team?
I mean, Drake's a perfectionist, right? Maybe there were some production issues he wasn't happy with. Or perhaps there's something contractual going on that we just don't know about.
Yeah, it's definitely giving more drama than like a reality TV show.
Yeah.
From sold-out shows to sudden cancellations. Speaking of drama,
Yeah.
let's talk about Dame Lillard, a.k.a. Dame D-O-L-L-A, and his possible new crush on rapper Glorilla.
Ooh, this is juicy.
So we've got this audio clip of Dame in the locker room, and someone starts singing a Glorilla song. You really have to hear his reaction to this.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right.
Oh, wow. You can just see he lights up. Like, that's a man who appreciates some good music. And a talented woman.
Yeah, his body language says it all. And then we've got this clip of Glorilla getting interviewed, and when they ask her about Dame, she gets all flustered and tries to play it off.
She was definitely blushing. Let's listen to that clip. I love how those hosts are teasing her about all the prospects she must have in LA.
Yeah, it's classic. Two people being very aware of the public eye and trying to navigate a potential connection without adding fuel to the gossip fire.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk Master P. Remember last time he was on the podcast, he hinted at some big news in college sports.
Yeah, and he did not disappoint. He was just named president of basketball operations at the University of New Orleans.
Wow, that's huge. From hip-hop mogul to running a college basketball program, Master P is full of surprises.
It really speaks to his drive and his commitment to giving back. We know he's passionate about basketball, and this gives him a chance to really shape the next generation of athletes.
I'm curious to see what he does with this opportunity. From business to music to sports, he's always pushing boundaries.
He's definitely one to watch. So what stood out to you from all these stories?
I think what's really interesting is how much we try to read between the lines with celebrities, whether it's legal battles or canceled tours or potential romances. We're always looking for those clues and trying to figure out the real story.
It's like we're all playing detective, isn't it?
Totally.
But sometimes the most fascinating part is the mystery itself.
Yeah, it really makes you wonder, what's really going on behind those carefully crafted public images.
Oh, totally. And it reminds us that there are often just layers of complexity that we as outsiders just might never fully grasp.
Speaking of layers, let's go back to A$AP Rocky for a minute. You explain the difference between criminal and civil cases, but can you like break it down even further? Why can someone be found not guilty in one but liable in the other for like the same incident?
Yeah, it all comes down to those different burdens of proof we were talking about earlier. Think of it like a scale, right?
Okay.
In a criminal case, that scale needs to tip all the way to one side for a guilty verdict. The prosecution has to present overwhelming evidence, like enough to eliminate any reasonable doubt.
Okay, that makes sense. So in Rocky's criminal case, the evidence wasn't strong enough to like tip that scale all the way over.
Right. But in a civil case, that scale doesn't need to chip as far. Relli just needs to show that it's more likely than not that Rocky caused him harm.
So even if the evidence wasn't strong enough for a criminal conviction, it could still be enough to convince a judge or jury that Rocky was responsible in like a civil case?
Exactly. It's a subtle but really important distinction, and it kind of highlights how the legal system can sometimes produce, seemingly contradictory outcomes.
Yeah. It's definitely a lot to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Okay, back to Drake. Let's play devil's advocate for a second. Is it possible there's a legitimate reason for those canceled shows that we just haven't heard yet? Like, could it be something personal he's dealing with?
It's definitely possible. We tend to forget that celebrities are human too. They have families and personal struggles and things that they choose to keep private.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in all the speculation, but we should also respect his right to privacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes the truth does come out eventually, but maybe not on the timeline that the public expects. You might never know the full story, and that's okay.
Yeah, I guess it's a good reminder that we don't always need to have all the answers.
Right. And sometimes the mystery is part of what keeps things interesting. It's like a good book that leaves you wanting more.
Okay, now let's talk about Dame and Glorilla. It's fun to speculate about a potential romance, but is it fair to read so much into, just a few playful interactions?
It's a valid question. We have to be careful about projecting our own narratives onto public figures, especially when it comes to their personal lives. Just because they seem flirty in an interview doesn't necessarily mean they're rushing to become like the next power couple.
True, but you can't deny there's a certain chemistry there.
Oh, I agree. There's definitely a spark.
Yeah.
And it's natural for people to be drawn to that kind of energy and wonder if there's something more beneath the surface.
Yeah, maybe this is the beginning of something special, or maybe it's just a fleeting moment of connection. Either way, it's a fun story to watch unfold.
Exactly. And it's a good reminder that amidst all the serious stuff, there's always room for a little lightheartedness and the possibility of unexpected connections.
Speaking of unexpected connections, let's talk about Master P and his new role in college basketball. What are your thoughts on this move, and what kind of impact do you think he could have?
I think it's a fascinating move. It speaks to his entrepreneurial spirit and his desire to make a difference beyond music. He's always been someone who thinks outside the box, and this is a prime example of that.
Yeah, he's always been passionate about basketball, too. Remember, he even played in the NBA for a bit?
That's right. So this isn't completely out of left field for him. He has a genuine love for the game and a deep understanding of the business side of sports.
It's inspiring to see someone like Master P, who came from, humble beginnings, achieve so much success, and then use his platform to give back and create opportunities for others.
Absolutely. He's a role model for anyone who wants to break boundaries and make a positive impact. And I'm really curious to see how he approaches this new challenge and what kind of legacy he'll build at the University of New Orleans.
It's definitely a story we'll be following closely. Okay, before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
All right, hit me with that final thought-provoking question.
In a world where information is constantly bombarding us from all directions, how do we discern truth from speculation? Especially when it comes to celebrities and public figures who often seem larger than life.
That's a great question. And it's one that we all have to grapple with in this day and age. I think the key is to be critical consumers of information, to question our assumptions and consider different perspectives, and not just accept everything we see or hear at face value.
And maybe sometimes it's okay to just sit with a little uncertainty, to acknowledge that we might never have all the pieces of the puzzle.
Well said. The journey of discovery is often more rewarding than arriving at a definitive answer. And that's what makes these deep dives so fascinating.
Yeah, it's like we're always piecing together a puzzle, but sometimes we just have to accept that maybe we're missing a few pieces.
Exactly, and that's okay. It keeps things interesting, encourages us to keep learning and exploring,
Yeah. Well said. So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep digging deeper into these stories. Don't just accept those headlines at face value. Do your own research. Form your own opinions. And maybe you'll even uncover some insights that we missed.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you'll discover some connections or patterns that shed some new light on all these events.
The world of hip-hop, basketball, and everything in between. It's full of surprises, and it's always evolving.
So stay curious, keep those deep dives going, and we'll catch you on the next episode.